Hey everybody, I'm Eric from Corter Leather, and this is the instructional video on how to put my signature front pocket wallet kit together. Now, the front pocket kit comes with everything you need to make the wallet. You get all of your leather pieces. You get a bag that includes all the tools that you need, including thread, a little bit of wax, we'll talk about that later, some edge burnishing tools, we'll talk about those later as well, and of course, needles. For a printed instruction guide, there's a QR code here. You can scan that. That'll bring you to a PDF version that you can print out at home. If you're so inclined and you don't have these tools at home, you can also add to your purchase some thread nippers, which will help you cut your thread, and an edge burnishing tool, which will help you shine up your edges when you go to burnish. Now, we'll talk about all that later. Let's get into making the kit. So this kit is meant for a front pocket, slim back pocket. I actually carried this wallet for a long time. Now, before you start stitching, you might want to burnish the edges that you're not going to be able to reach once the wallet is put together. Those pieces are going to be the inside of the thumb slot slider, the top of the back pocket, and this curved section here. Now, you can also choose to burnish the top of this section, which has no stitching holes, but you'll be able to burnish that after once the wallet's together if you forget, or if you just so want to burnish it after you've put it all together and sanded it all smooth. If you want to get a little fancy in either a kit or any leather piece you're making, you can burnish the edges. Now, I've sanded these edges down. You can go down to 220 grit, 300 grit, 400 grit, 600 grit. You can make a mirror edge if you'd like. I'm just using water here. You need some sort of lubricant. You can use gum trag, you can use toconol, you can use whatever you'd like to use. But we're gonna get this, we're almost casing it. So we want it damp, but not totally soaking wet. And when you're using water in your finger, it takes a minute to get there. But what this is gonna do is we're gonna use the canvas that's provided in the kit after we've sanded, and we're gonna basically sand again, but with the canvas. And what we're doing is we're sealing the edge of our leather by bringing the oils that are inside of the leather up to the top. And as you can see with the change of color, that's going to prevent any moisture from getting into the wallet. Now, this will happen on its own. It's lovingly referred to as a pocket burnish if you don't burnish and just let your pocket do it. But we're using canvas. We're basically just emulating putting your wallet in, taking it out, putting it in, taking it out. That's all, not all burnishing is, but when you burnish with canvas, that's kind of what you're emulating. But the result is actually a higher quality product because this prevents moisture from getting into your layers of leather. Now, it is not necessary. Pieces will naturally burnish over time. It takes about 6 months. And your wallet's not going to rot away if you don't want to do it. But it's how I like to finish my leather wallets, and it gives your piece a nice professional look. And so that's why a lot of people do it. And if you want to give it a try on the kit, you get your canvas. You also get the option to get an actual slicker. Now, the slicker is very similar to using canvas. I'm going to put a little extra water on here. The slicker you would use more with gum trag or toconol. But we're going to do the same thing with a wood slicker. And as you can see, we're darkening those fibers a little bit more. It's a little steadier to use. But really the rule that I like to stick to is if you're using water, I go canvas. If you're using gum trag or toconol or some sort of acrylic resin based edge finish, go with the slicker, which you can add on to any kit. Now, a couple of these pieces look very similar, but they're a little bit different. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our thumb slider piece. Now, this piece here is meant to slide your most used card out of your wallet with your thumb. So you can pay for your coffee, do whatever. This piece we're going to sew to the square piece that has stitching holes all the way around it. And this is a good intro if you've never done any saddle stitching to how to saddle stitch. Now, if you don't know how to saddle stitch, this is how you do it. There are a few ways to do a saddle stitch. The way that I was taught is more of a, it's called a leapfrog stitch, and it's less of a traditional French saddle stitch, more of an Americana saddle stitch. And a lot of you guys out there that do other fiber arts and crafts are going to see this as two running stitches running parallel and concurrently. However, we only use one piece of thread with our two needles. To thread the needle, you're going to obviously put the thread through the eye of the needle. Now we're using 0.8 millimeter Ritz of thread here, so this is thick thread. It might take you a couple times. It helps sometimes to cut the thread at an angle. Then I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to go about an inch in, and I'm going to stab it through the thread. Now you can do this once, you can do it twice, you can do it 3 times would be excessive, but we'll do it twice. And that's going to lock that needle onto that thread. It's going nowhere. I've done it on the other side too. Now we're ready to start our saddle stitch. To start a saddle stitch, what I like to do is I put one needle into one hole and the next needle into the next hole. I pull both of them out and I make sure that both of my needles are even. That lets me know that both the lengths of thread are even. I'm going to drop the front thread. I'm going to take the middle finger of my non-dominant hand and hold it. A lot of the way that this saddle stitching method works relies on you keeping tension by wrapping the front thread over your finger, over your pointer finger, and under your middle finger. I'm going to take my back needle. I'm going to go into the hole that already has the thread through it. I'm going to pull. Then, with my free hand, I'm going to pull this while keeping tension on my backhand. And that's it. You're going to go front to back, front to back, front to back. So now the back thread is the front thread. I'm going to drop this thread, drop this thread. I'm going to pick up the back thread with my dominant hand. I'm going to grab the front thread with the middle finger of my non-dominant hand. And then we're back right where we started. I'm keeping tension with my non-dominant hand, and I'm advancing the stitch by putting, I'm showing y'all so I can't see it, but by putting the needle into the hole that already has our front stitch on it. And that is how I saddle stitch. It's generally called a leapfrog stitch. But what we're doing here is we're creating 2 stitches at the same time. What that means is that should this stitch break, one of these stitches, should one of these stitches break, we still have a whole other stitch line that's going to keep this piece together. And that's how you saddle stitch. We have our 4 pieces here, and we're going to take these 2 and we're going to put them to the side for a minute because we have to start out by stitching our little pocket to the pocket that has all of the stitch holes around the whole thing. We're going to do that by simply placing, you can use glue if you'd like, but I'm just going to simply place this piece on top of this piece. I'm going to take my thread, and we have to measure out our thread to make sure that we cut enough, because we don't want to run out of thread while we're stitching. And the way you do that is, of course, the kit comes with plenty of thread. You're going to use 4 lengths of the stitch line that you want to sew. I'm going to use the optional thread nippers, nip those off, and get to sewing. So I'm actually going to take these 2 pieces and face them away from me, because we want to start stitching here so that our back stitch, which will be 3 stitches, will land on our pocket. That way we'll have a little bit of extra reinforcement as we use this pocket over the years. So I'm going to put 1 needle in the corner here and the other needle in the second pocket and sew my way down. So once I've got my whole stitch line done, you can see that our back stitch is going to reinforce our pocket. Now, you can use thread zappers, I think they're called. You can use anything you'd like to seal off this thread. it is a synthetic thread, which means that it melts. I'm just going to use a common household lighter. And the key is you have your very hot part where the blue is and your very not as hot part where the orange is. So we kind of just want to kiss this and then lift up. Kiss and lift up. Obviously blow out any fires that might happen. And once we melt our thread down enough, we're just going to take our lighter and smush that down. Since that's synthetic thread, because with these kits you have the choice of choosing any color thread you'd like, we're good to go, because not only do we have our back stitch, but we have our stitch melted in, so that's going to go nowhere. Our next step is going to be to put this whole wallet together. That's it. There's just 2 stitch lines. So this is how we're going to stack it. We're going to put our square piece, well, no, we're going to put our curved piece on the outside, our square piece on top of it. Then we're going to take our stitched line and we're going to put that along the line on the top of our square piece with no stitching to create a 3rd center pocket. Once we have all that together, we're going to stitch around this entire seam, and then we're going to be done with the wallet. If you'd like to use glue to hold this all together, barge, eco stick, etc., go for it. That's what I personally do. If you don't have glue though, do not worry. We can take a couple of alligator clips. They don't have to be wrapped in leather. And all we have to do is put them on the holes themselves, because any marks that these alligator clips make will be covered by our stitching. Now I'm just going to put a couple of alligator clips, and I'm going to make sure that I fold them in so that my thread doesn't get stuck. Now, there are 2 different ways that you can sew this up. This is not a particularly long stitch line, but if you're new, it might be a lot of thread to handle, because the thread can get kind of, when you have your 2 needles and you're learning a new stitch, it can get kind of all over the place. So you can either sew from one end all the way around, or you can start in the middle, sew up one side, back stitch, start in the middle, sew up the other side, back stitch. What I'm going to do, because I have a back stitch on this side, is I'm going to start stitching here, I'm going to sew all the way around, and I'm going to end here, so I'll have a back stitch here, and visually it will even out. Measuring thread on this one isn't that big of a deal, because we're using all this is the only thing we have left to sew. The only issue is going to be using too much thread. So what I would suggest is threading your needles using a bit extra thread in the part that you stab the needle through. That way, if you need extra thread, you can undo your needle and you have extra thread waiting for you on the other side of it. So if I can do this on camera really quickly, which is always the slowest I ever end up threading needles, I can show you. So normally you would thread your needle, pull out about 2 inches, and stab your needle right through the thread. I am going to give myself a very generous amount, about a 1/2 foot, maybe even a little bit more. And I'm going to stab my needle through my thread there, so it's nice and locked in. That should give us plenty of thread to sew around. But if we do run into an issue, we can always undo these needles, unlock this extra thread, and finish our stitching. From there, it's just simply sewing it up. And here we go. Here's our finished piece. So we have our main, I like to call it the main pocket, even though it's the smallest pocket, because I put my most used card in this pocket, because you can use your thumb to slide it out. And like I said in the beginning, pay for your coffee in the morning, do everything else. You have a center pocket that holds folded cash. And then you have this pocket here, which I always hate when my credit cards get all chewed up. And this covers your whole credit card, but it's still easy to pull out, or whatever card you want. It keeps everything in really good condition. Now, if you want to, this would be when you would finish the edges. You can use the included sandpaper, you can use the included canvas, and go through the burnishing process that we explained in the beginning. And remember, if you scroll up, you'll be able to see that there are a lot of options for leather and thread, so you can customize pretty much all of it. And that's going to be about it. That's how you make this wallet. I would highly suggest it. It's super fun, and I use one of these every day. Thank you guys so much for watching.